talk,
identity,
and access
management.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim right there.
Hey, Jeff.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm sheltering in place. How about you?
Ditto. I've left the house twice in the last 2 weeks, I think. Both times were for food.
Right. You know, I think we have a huge international audience.
Huge.
I don't know that we even have
Literally
a huge audience, but
dozens of people listening at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, we're taking over the internet one set of viewers at a time. But so I don't know how it's like what it's like everywhere. But I think in the United States, at least my perspective is that people are following the stay-at-home orders and the social distancing and being pretty good sports about it overall. And I haven't heard about very many people having to be forced by the law enforcement or anything to comply. How about you?
I would say for the most part, yeah. I mean, the U.S. has, like any other probably location, where you got some people who are following the rules and some that don't seem to care. But I think people are starting to come around to it. Not sure how it's working around the world. My only other data point internationally would be we were having a conversation with Igor the other day, who's part of our team that works in Brazil, I believe, Sao Paulo. Mm-hmm. And he said that, pretty much there it's like normal. So it doesn't sound like it's kind of hit that area quite yet, at least from, the total lockdown. But I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, it's an interconnected world, and you're seeing the waves as it rolls to the U.S. as the bigger cities are getting harder hit, and then it'll start to roll down into the smaller cities and so forth. So, PSA, stay home if you can. Understand it's not an option maybe for everyone who's listening, but take care of yourself by taking care of others.
There you go.
So with that public service announcement out of the way, which is always a great segue. Today we want to talk
we're doing
about
our part. We're doing our part.
Hey, we got the word out, and the dozens of people listening to us hopefully will pay attention. Yeah. So with that segue, we're going to move into a conversation around digital transformation and customer or consumer identity and access management. How's that sound?
It sounds great. I mean, digital transformation is, it's been around for, the concept has been around for a long time. It feels like, at least for us lately, we've gotten a burst of additional clients or more interest in our CIAM consulting specific to companies that are doing a digital transformation. So it's kind of top of mind for you and I at the moment. And figured, hey, if it's top of mind, it's something that's good for us to talk about. We've got one of our clients put together a slide which kind of captured kind of the main components of digital transformation from his perspective. I don't think it's anything that's that much different. I think he did a great job of kind of capturing the main points of what digital transformation is, at least within his organization. But I think many organizations that are taking on digital transformation, it means very similar things. So what I proposed to you earlier was, hey, why don't we, use this slide as kind of a framework for our discussion and, pick through each of these major building blocks of digital transformation and just talk about them.
That sounds good. So you want to start with the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Okay, so the first one they talked about is replacing legacy and homegrown systems. But to me, this is kind of the essence of what digital transformation is all about. So I think when I first heard the term digital transformation, I had to, this is probably over a decade ago, look it up on Google and start really researching what is digital transformation. The idea was going from kind of a brick and mortar type of business model, something in the physical world, and then moving it into the e-commerce world. Well, there are not many companies that are still 100%, or not already the majority of their business happening in the digital world. And so it's not like digital transformation means you're going from brick and mortar to online, and at least not nowadays. I think nowadays what it means is that you've been doing business online in a sub-optimized way, or you've been doing it the way you did it, 10 years ago, and really haven't updated things very much, or things have kind of, what I think we see a lot with our enterprise clients is that they've kind of come online, they've built a lot of different web properties, they've matured at different rates, they've kind of each branched off in their own way, and they left identity and access management behind, as well as some other features of a digital transformation. And so, these web properties, these homegrown systems have, a lot of them have to be retrofitted or replaced. And some of the infrastructure components like identity and access management need to be replaced.
Yeah, it really can. It's like the square one, right? This is why you're probably doing it. And I don't know. A lot of our organizations are probably looking at digital transformation now, and hopefully they've already begun that journey. But I have a feeling that the situation that the world finds itself in now is probably going to be a big catalyst for those that haven't gotten onto it, is to figure out how to be more effective in this potentially new world of far more remote e-commerce, online connectivity that people are expecting.
It's really interesting. You see all these restaurants and I mean, kind of in the real world, what I'm seeing is restaurants are closing, and some businesses that are quote unquote non-essential. I think restaurants are essential to me, Jeff. I don't know about you, but I think I keep thinking to myself, like, this would be the perfect opportunity for them to do a remodel. Just gut the building, do a remodel, do the thing that they've been kind of aching to do for years. But at the same time, they've all of a sudden got no income, and they've got uncertainty about what it's going to be like when they reopen. And so it does present a challenge that, they need to invest. They've long needed to invest. Now is a perfect opportunity because customers can't come in and sit down anyway, but they've got to have kind of some nerve in order to be able to go out there and spend the money.
Yeah, and I feel like the restaurants are a really tough spot, and if you don't have any type of online ordering and pickup type of capability, you're basically screwed at this point.
Yeah.
You see, I see a lot of restaurants that are kind of scrambling to put it together, but the ones that had already taken that into account and had built some of their business to account for that, I think will have a lot better chance of surviving. But I hate to say it, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of restaurants that end up closing down because it's a very hard business to be in. I used to work in the restaurant business very, very long time ago. It's, I don't remember if the stat is still true, but most restaurants fail within the first year or two of being opened up because it takes that long to really kind of generate the sales that are needed to keep things going. And if you've opened up a restaurant recently, you probably haven't hit that mark of profitability. And now you're probably in a position where you have to decide whether you're going to, try to keep it going through some sort of online experience. And that's where, unifying a user experience probably makes a lot of sense from a digital transformation standpoint, which I think is the second box that we want to talk about when it comes to kind of digital transformation.
Right.
But it's an unfortunate situation, but I agree that, it's a great time if you haven't done it to, if you can, think about doing those remodels, whether it's physical or, logical when it comes to, the business and being able to kind of keep it afloat.
Yeah, I just thought of something that's pretty interesting. So, take the restaurant example, somebody who's kind of done a digital transformation, in my opinion. So this is based on a restaurant that I use a lot. This isn't a political show, but it's Chick-fil-A. So I go to Chick-fil-A a lot. I think their food is really good. And they've got an app. Now, they try and get people to pay through the app, and they got a reward system, but they also know who their customers are. They also have the ability to send alerts to my phone, send me emails, stay in touch with me through this whole thing, and send me special offers and get me to go to their drive-through. And, that required them to invest, while things were still kind of, everything was hunky-dory, for them to invest in this digital transformation and then building themselves up digital capabilities to support their brick and mortar operations.
Yeah, and I think McDonald's is a good example where if you go into a McDonald's today, it used to be you'd walk up to a counter and, you know, tell someone your order and they would punch it in the computer. And now it seems like everyone I go into, which admittedly isn't that many, so I don't make a sound McDonald's all the time, but the ones that I've been into recently over the last however many years have the online key, or not the online, but they're kiosks, and you go in and you put your order in, and you don't actually ever talk to anyone other than the person who is handing out the orders as they're ready. And it's a very similar experience as having an app on your phone or on the computer. You're walking up to a display, you're making your selections and you're tapping and you're making your customizations or whatever. And it's a totally, person-free experience, whether you're in the store or you're, in an app or whatever, if you're doing some sort of pickup. I think the only time you actually ever talk to anybody, like if you're going through a drive-through and you're yelling out your order to the
right,
to the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But having that unified experience, I think, puts them in a lot better position to be able to weather that kind of situation too.
And speaking of which, so unified user experience was kind of the second item that digital transformation is all about. And in my experience with digital transformations, this is oftentimes one of the biggest drivers, because identity and one of the components where identity and access management, in this case, customer identity and access management, really are the focal point of the digital transformation, because you start out, where's the first digital experience you get as a customer going into a company's web or app presences? You have to register for an ID, and then you have to authenticate with that ID. So it becomes the front door a lot of times. And how often do you go through a process and you say, oh boy, they want me to create another ID? And if it's a pain in the butt, how often do you walk away? It really depends, I guess, on how badly you need to use that service. But that's something that, this is where IT and marketing really come together. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is if you look at the CIAM space, traditionally, if you rewind the clock 5-10 years ago, when they talked about CIAM, there were two major platforms that were kind of in this space, and it was Gigya, which is now SAP Customer Cloud, I think is the name of their product, but basically Gigya, and Jan Rain, which is now Akamai. And the reason I think they were considered customer IAM was they had a lot of marketing features, a lot of ability to do like progressive profiling, some of the things that are hot now. Traditional IAM vendors are creating within their product. So in other words, the ability to take traditional tools that were built for enterprise IAM and make them customer IAM capable tools, and they're adding these marketing features. But creating the ability to have a unified customer experience, I really do feel like it starts with the identity management, the registration process, and then ongoing its authentication.
And I feel like that's like the number one reason that we've been working with a lot of clients recently is they have this fragmented login experience for their customers, and they're looking to replace that with a more single sign-on type approach, right? They've had mergers, acquisitions, or they've stood things up in silos in different parts of the business, and it takes 12 different accounts to use the 12 different services that the organization has on offer, and the goal is to get it down to as few logins, hopefully one if you can, to be able to take advantage of all those services. And as a benefit of that, you try to get a better view of your constituents or your customers, et cetera, and try to build out from there using the identity at the center. Plug for the podcast. To have that 360 view, right, of the constituents and your customers, and being able to understand all that.
You're great with the segues today, Jeff. So yeah, that was the next area, was this 360 degree view of the constituents. So you've got, again, the traditional approach was, we need an app, or we need a website, we need an app, we need another app, we need another website, and you start to build these data silos. Now, the worst case scenario is where you've got an identity and a set of credentials for each app, but even let's assume that you kind of approached it a little bit smarter than that, and you've gotten all of your apps using some form of single sign-on. You still wind up within the structure of that application building silos of data about the person. So let's just say, use my Chick-fil-A example. You've got a website, you've got an app, and you went to each one, and on the website you've done some things. And let's assume that they're separate applications. You've done some things as Jeff said, you've gone in and ordered a T-shirt or entered a contest. Then on the app, you ordered a chicken sandwich. Now, those interactions that you're having with the company, you want to be able to pull those together so that you can have one view of what is all the interactions that Jeff Stedman has done with us. So a big piece of the digital transformation is usually how do you take all this customer data, bring it together, and create that 360 view of the customer. Well, the first part is you certainly need to know that Jeff Stedman is the same person who used the website and used the app. So there's like a CRM function to this as well, where identity and access management comes into play, is really being able to say, yes, we know this is one human being that is coming into our various different applications, or it might not even be applications. There may be brick and mortar. There may be a situation where you go into one of the brick and mortar locations and use a kiosk and you provide enough information. So at some level within your digital transformation, you need to be able to tie all that back to a single human being. Otherwise, it's a lost opportunity. It's a lost opportunity to market to that person in an intelligent way.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the marketing dream, right? To know everything that I'm doing, all the different services that I'm taking advantage of, and then giving me targeted offers based on what I think might be interesting to be able to either spend more money or drive more engagement, whatever, using the food example as we are here, right? If they know that I go to, this particular restaurant, or let's say I go to McDonald's every Friday, and they start to peg that behavior and they know which McDonald's I'm going to be at, they could send a targeted thing to encourage me to either come on a different day or to spend more money, right, on the days that I typically go there, by giving me a coupon maybe that is good for, something extra where they can make a little more money off me. So having all that data is important. I think one thing that I'm not a fan of is trying to shove all that transactional data into a CIAM platform. I don't think that is the right spot for it. And sometimes, you'll see folks that are trying to do that. That's better served having that information outside of consumer IAM directories, those sorts of things, because they're really not designed to store transactional, information. They're very good at what they do, but it's like any other tool. If you try to use it for something else, your mileage is going to vary probably greatly based on what you try to do with it.
I mean, that's an absolutely fantastic point. And I think that's why organizations need a digital transformation strategy that is put together with an enterprise architect mindset, understanding that identity and access management is kind of a cornerstone to that, but it's not one tool to fix every problem. As you're talking about McDonald's, I'm thinking, gosh, there are hundreds of millions of customers. Almost everybody goes to McDonald's at some point, right? And so the amount of data that they're generating around a person, it's got to be dumped into some kind of NoSQL database, something in the cloud, something way more flexible and capable of handling big data than an IAM system is designed to or intended to be used for. So I think that's a fantastic point. So I think digital transformation needs to include identity and access management, but it certainly can't be the one solution for the whole thing.
Right. And once you have all that data, you're able to do some interesting things, not only on the targeting and the marketing side, but, once you know what normal behavior looks like, you can start to look at things like, risk and fraud and trying to reduce cases of those by spotting potentially, weird, not appropriate transactions or, utilizations of services, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, where you're going with this, I think, is the next bullet around reducing risk and fraud. But even just thinking about what we just talked about, all this data that you're generating, and it ties back to a human being. And where are you putting that data? How are you securing that data? So, as you start to take data outside of the applications and dump it places, you're creating new footprint that could be exposed to attacks. You're essentially just creating a new attack vector, if you will. So I think this has got to be part of the strategy as well, which is, how are we going to take all the data? It could be log data, it could be data that you're generating from your applications and putting it into a big data kind of cloud or a NoSQL database. And how are you making sure that that data remains secure? So security's got to be a component of the strategy. More specifically with identity and access management, obviously, authentication is a huge part of your digital transformation, and the tools in the access management space, authentication space, have really grown exponentially in terms of their strength, their ability to use other factors to get away from passwords. And I think, this is one of those areas where it really helps to work with an expert, somebody who understands the space, understands what each of the major products, and I'm not limited to major products, but what each of the vendor offerings have in terms of features and capabilities to reduce fraud, and how do they go about doing that. I think what is important there is it is really choosing one that fits your use cases. We love to talk about passwordless and how passwords are dead, and we say that because we think passwords suck. At the same time, how many websites do you go to that you're not creating a password? And the reason is because it's still the ubiquitous way that we all learn to use the internet. We all learn to use applications is create an account and a password. People understand what a password is. Even, people who aren't technologists understand what passwords are. And so whether we hate passwords or not, if we were creating a customer facing application that 100 million people were going to register to use, thinking that we're going to make the whole thing passwordless might be, it's probably not the right business decision at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think it's still a bridge too far. I think there are some things you can do to hide that. And I think of an example of applications that use email as their password. You're still providing a password to get to your email system to click on the link that authorizes you to use the application. So, passwordless is a great idea, and I think it'll hopefully get here eventually. And there's a lot of technologies out there that kind of help with it, but in the consumer space, I think it's going to be a while still. So we got to kind of plan for that, and being able to, secure the data that comes along with it is incumbent on the organization as well. So you have to plan for passwords, but that doesn't absolve you from your security responsibilities. If you're collecting data, you should be securing it. If you're not going to have a good time at some point, because that data is going to get out. And then the questions are going to become, well, what were you doing to secure my data? And then it's going to come out that you weren't doing a very good job of securing the data. And then, that can lead to any number of things. You've seen, companies fold up because of it. You've seen ones take huge hits to their market share or stock prices, et cetera. And others who have done actually a really good job of, taking a step back and figuring out what they need to work on to be able to get to where they need to be. I know that Zoom, for example, has had a lot of issues recently come up around their security model because they've seen, exponential growth with everyone working from home now and using it. And, they certainly have some security issues to fix. But at the same time, a lot of it is user error, I'll say, in that settings aren't set the way they should be. Is that the fault of the user, or is that the fault of the company? I think you can argue either case. And the stance that Zoom, for example, has taken is they want to make it easy to use their software. So their security by default is pretty lax. And over the weekend, they made an adjustment where now the security defaults are probably where they should have been to begin with, but they sacrificed security in the name of usability. But to their credit, they've, I think at least publicly, they've expressed, their desire to fix things and have put a pause on new features and are spending the next 90 days fixing all these security things. And I feel like they're taking it seriously. And, that's the kind of approach that I'd like to see more companies, because nothing is secure. If it's built by a human, it's going to have security holes in it. And the more humans building it, the more security holes, there are potential for there. So I want to know that, if you have an application that's not secure and I'm a user of it, that you're at least trying to do the right thing. And I think there's a right way and a wrong way to respond to it. And so far I've been satisfied with, Zoom's publicly facing statements. Could be a total disaster behind the scenes. I have no idea, but at least publicly, I feel like they're trying to do the right thing.
Right. I would also say, Jeff, you care enough to dig beyond the headlines. That the problem with this stuff so often is that people want the headline. We are friendly with a company that recently had a quote unquote breach. And when you dug behind, and the headline was, oh, this company got breached. When you dug behind the headline, it wasn't their product that got breached. It was some third-party tool that they used that had not the most essential data that got hacked. And they still addressed it very seriously. But you would think by the term, someone saying, well, this company got breached, that their product must suck. It must be worthless. I don't want to use that company. You're a security company and you got breached. It was the headline. And I know that, I saw something where Marriott got breached again. And it, when you dig beyond the headline, it was, they fumbled some PII data, but it wasn't like they lost everybody's path. It wasn't like some of the major breaches that have happened. And so these headlines catch people's attention, and what you want to try to do is not be a company that gets slammed by a headline.
Yeah, well, you need a snazzy headline to get people to read your newspaper or click your link, to read your article. So it's going to be, the headline is going to be Marriott breached, and you're going to have to read, right?
Yeah.
And really try to figure out, okay, what exactly happened, because, at this point, breach can mean any number of things. And, trying to understand that is an important part of where we need to be.
I think we're all trying to absorb so much information on a day-to-day basis. We live in this world that generates so much data, and we're trying to absorb it. And headlines, we're all guilty of it. We look at some headlines and go no further, and usually end up misinformed.
Right. All right, let's move on to the next one. Compliance, consent, and privacy. What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are, each organization needs a strategy. I don't think anybody's insulated from managing this well. I'm largely talking on the privacy front there. We had Richard Bird on our podcast last week. He did an awesome job kind of talking about some of the pitfalls here. But even keeping it more simple, even if we were living in a world where there wasn't this major privacy regulation issue that exists, if we were just talking about people's ability to control, how you communicate to them, how you use their private data, most companies want to be able to do that. And I believe, I'm an optimist. I believe that most marketers who work for reputable firms care about, being upfront and having integrity and letting their customers control how they communicate with them. And, we used to hear a lot back in the day that if you got some email from a company with an unsubscribe link, don't click it, because if you do, that shows them that you're a real person. And now they're going to send you 10 times as many emails. And, if you're getting, if that's true of, mainline companies that you trust and they're doing stuff like that, shame on them. But I don't think that most people out there, human beings who are working for these companies, would be comfortable operating in that fashion. And so when I think of this area and I think of digital transformation, again, it's a company that's got multiple web properties, multiple apps that they go to market with, and they need to present to their customer kind of one face of the customer. This is that unified customer experience and the ability to manage those contact settings, those the consent. It ought to be centralized. It ought to be one place, and then those settings should flow through all the systems. And we're talking about privacy, and we go to the next step in GDPR. And I want to tell you, forget me, take me out of your system. I should be able to go to one interface, run that workflow, and then it should flow back to all the applications. So I think from a digital transformation strategy, you ought to be looking at this of how do we provide consent and privacy control from a single pane of glass. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the gold standard, is to have that kind of like customer portal page where I can go in and manage all my interactions and things right around the service or company that I'm working with. And it's important to make sure that works, because at this point, I'm not going to name the company because they're an identity company, but I get an email from them. It seems like every other day that is obviously a spam email around, not spam, but they're marketing their product and services, et cetera. And that's great, but I don't want to receive it every day. So I click unsubscribe, because for the most part, that seems to be working now. It used to be, like you said, that didn't. I don't know how many times I've had to click unsubscribe on all their different marketing lists. That's really bugging me to the point where now anything coming from that domain is going straight into my junk folder. I'm just tired of dealing with it. So if you don't provide a good user experience for people to opt out of the things that they don't want to see, but still retain, the ability to view messages or, services or emails or whatever it may be, for services they do want, you run the risk of just saying, all right, well, I'm just going to take a shotgun approach to it and say, I'm just not going to read anything that you send me anymore. So I think having good, consent management as part of the user experience is borderline critical, right up there with offering things like, the appropriate security and, MFA and the single login experience, all that stuff that's kind of like, yeah, it totally makes sense. Don't drop the ball when it comes to, okay, now you got them in your system the way you wanted it to. How do you gracefully let them manage, what interactions they have with you is a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that story. I've had a similar situation where, you unsubscribe and I can just process in my mind, oh, you want to unsubscribe from newsletter 123, but obviously you're good with all the other newsletters. We didn't give you a chance to unclick the other newsletters. And when a company, that's why I kind of harped on the idea of like integrity. Like if I go and I'm not going to pick a real company, but if I go to a company and I feel like they're doing something like that, I'm going to have a bad impression of that company. So one, I'm probably not going to do business with that company. But even number two, I might go and tell other people not to do business with that company. You don't want to do business with them. They have no integrity. They spam you once they get your information. They treat you like, they're a bad company. So I do think this is very critical for marketers to make sure that their brand doesn't fall into that category of junk mail.
Yeah, you want to be sticky, but you want to be so sticky that people can't escape the web that gets put together.
Right.
So once you've got all this stuff taken care of, I bet you're done, right? You've built the perfect CIAM system and there's no more work to be had, and you can just probably go home and play video games.
Or wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. No, so this is the last bullet in this deck, which or not in this deck, but in this slide, which I think our friend did a great job of capturing those. His last one was streamlining operations. And so, it's going to be so many things, but I'm going to pull one thing out of it, which is, we talk about multiple generations of technology. Obviously, your digital transformation. So my first IAM project 16 years ago, I would call a digital transformation project. And when I started pulling back the covers, and I didn't even know what identity and access management was at the time, I said, we need to get one ID per person across all these websites. And I talked it through with my boss, and he said, I don't get any new features with that. Why can't I just get one new portal? And problem was that we were going to market with 6 or 7 different portals, and they're all being developed independently, and people had different logins for each of the portals. And just to get it all moved into one portal, that was just such a gargantuan task. It would have never happened. It just would have never succeeded. It was too big. I feel like the reality is for many organizations that they're going to have to support a heterogeneous technology environment, things of different generations, some cloud apps that did a certain purpose that are just what they need, and they're going to have that homegrown application that they built 10 years ago and keep fixing and updating, and then they're going to have some other things. And so for me, having an identity and access management platform that supports those various use cases, that lets the technology be independent, that has a layer of abstraction capability, APIs, things like that, so that you can bring in new technology and leverage the underlying services. So that's from the IAM standpoint. But when you look at the digital transformation overall, it's having the tools that can make that possible, the ability to provision or move data around and master data, having an integration platform. This is a big one that a lot of companies take on first, which is I know I need to connect everything with APIs, but I can't just do point to point all over the place. I need to have some kind of hub and spoke type approach. So they move to an API gateway or an ESB, or using the term integration platform to kind of bundle those two ideas together and provide a kind of a hub and spoke highway system for API communication. So to me, all this is fits into streamlined operation, but there's obviously much more to that.
Yeah, I think you covered quite a bit of it, and I think it's not specific to digital transformation or consumer IAM, but the phrase "it's okay to get smarter," right? You can always improve. It's okay to become better at what you do or what you offer. That's just the way things work. Hindsight's always 2020. It's like, oh, okay, hey, you know what? Next time, let's do it this way. Or, hey, we've noticed this issue that's come up because circumstances changed or products changed or consumer behavior changed, whatever it may be. Great, okay, that's part of the world. How are you going to handle it? It's okay to get smarter. It's okay to improve. And if you're not continuously improving, processes or looking for ways to improve, you end up stagnant. And, at some point, some other technology or company is going to blow past you because you didn't keep up with, what is required based on consumer behavior or consumer needs, desires, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. And those needs are going to continue to evolve. So I wouldn't look at digital transformation as something we do now and never have to do again. Just something that if you do it right now, you should be able to continue to evolve, but you're never going to stand still. If you do it now and then do nothing to kind of stay current, you're going to have to do it again 10 years from now. So, and that's the whole thing we talk about with IAM, has to be treated like a program, not a project. You have to think about you're going to be in the IAM game going forward. I think digital transformation overall just includes IAM and other capabilities, but you're looking at it more from a higher level, like a business focus, and what are the technology components I need in order to make that work.
I think it's more evolution, right? You start with transformation, and then you can just continue to keep that ever evolving catalog of services and capabilities, et cetera. So that way, the organization evolves along with, behaviors and society, et cetera, to be able to remain relevant and, move forward. Kind of like people who thought the car, right? The the first cars weren't going to go anywhere because why don't you just get a horse? Right. Yeah, you can now, but now cars are everywhere, right? And so what's next? Is it electric cars and people moving away from combustion engines, those sorts of things. So, being able to stay at the forefront of where things are going is just as important to keep the longevity of your business going.
Yeah. One other thing I should probably bring up is we've been talking about a certain approach to digital transformation, which is I've got all these applications. I want to bring them together to, present things with the unified user experience. I want to get 360 with, these apps that I have. In other words, I don't want to rip and replace everything I have. Yet other organizations are taking a different approach, which is what I'll call like a platform approach. They'll say, we want to move everything onto Salesforce. Salesforce is like, to me, one of the application platforms that is the most popular ones that we see because it has so much flexibility. That's a different approach. But I kind of don't think, it's just a different approach. It could be in the long run just as successful. I think what I find with a lot of my clients is that they say Salesforce we can use to a certain extent. Almost everybody wants to at least put their toe in the water with Salesforce, but are you achieving 80, 90% replacement of your app footprint, or are you replacing 20, 30%? And it's a big difference in terms of what are the other components of technology that you need to kind of do this digital transformation.
All very well and good. I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Any final thoughts before we wrap for this week?
No, I think we did it again, Jeff.
We did it again.
We started out with a cloudy topic and somehow talked for 45 minutes about
it. Somehow, some way. That's the way it works. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and call it for this week. Hope people stay healthy, stay home, and we'll talk to you all in the next one. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. For more episodes, visit identityatthecenter.com.